Early extension is a really common movement among amateur golfers, but what is it and how can we fix it? So early extension is basically a movement in towards the ball with my hips in the downswing. So you can see here, as I progress to the ball into my hips have come in, it's given me the feeling of standing up a little bit. And generally speaking, if we early extend into the hip, we're going to struggle to get any compression on the golf ball, and we're going to start to lift the ball off the ground a little bit too much, generally resulting in an into-outswing path and quite a weak strike. I get a lot of amateur golfers that tell me they feel like through the swing they've lifted their head up. But almost always when I hear someone say they've lifted their head up, what they've actually done is they've moved their hips inwards. And you can see here, as I move into the ball, if I early extend and move my right hip in, I lose my posture and I stand up a little bit, and it does give me the feeling of lifting my head up. And what can often happen from here, if I take that to the extreme, is it's really easy for me to hit the top of the ball like that. So if we want to be hitting decent feeling iron shots, if we want to be starting to take a bit of a divot and get a bit of compression, we need to make sure we keep our hips back a little bit in the golf swing, and we get into positions where we're able to hold our posture through the hip. So if you feel like your head's coming up in the golf swing, or you filmed your golf swing and you're seeing like you're early extending a little bit, here's a couple of drills that can really help with that. The first drill I love to get rid of the feeling of early extension is to hit some shots with a really, really wide stance. And what you're going to find from here is actually the wider my stance goes, the less range of motion I have in my hips. So if you were to take this to the extreme, if I was to go for a mega wide stance, you can see as I move the club back, I can't really turn my hips at all. And if I was to go for a really, really narrow stance, I've got loads of range of motion in my hips, probably too much. So there's obviously a nice balance there that we need in a normal golf swing. But for this drill, we're going to go for a wider than normal stance, and we're going to try and take a bit of that hip movement out of it. And what you're going to feel from here is actually it's really, really hard for me to move that right hip in. So to move the club with any sort of speed, I'm going to have to start to rotate my upper body a little bit, and it's going to be much easier for me to keep the feeling of keeping that right hip back. So again, with anything, I always try and do this in practice swings first. And I'm trying to feel really good rotation and getting used to the feeling of that right hip and right leg staying back. And I can take this into shots as well. And you should start to feel from there, there's less temptation for that right hip to kick in, and it almost gives you the feeling of being a little bit more over the top of the ball, and hopefully resulting in strikes like that where you're taking a bit of a divot. Once I've had a couple of these, it's important we then take that feeling back into a normal swing. So I'm going to go for a normal whip setup now where I've got appropriate range of motion in my hips, but I'm really going to get the feeling of restriction that I had from this really wide setup. So as I move the club back here, I'm going to feel as restricted as I did when my feet were really wide, and I'm going to feel like actually to move the club I'm going to turn my chest a little bit more, and hopefully I'll be able to hold my posture a little bit better and stop the early extension. So it should look like this. Again, when you're getting this right, you're going to start to see a bit of a divot. You're going to start to feel a little bit more rotation in your upper body, and you should feel a little bit less of this standing up and lifting the head movement that we're going to get from an early extension swing. Another drill that I think is really, really good for this is by using an alignment stick and a training aid that's going to hold the alignment stick in the ground. You can pick these training aids up for about £30 on Amazon, or if you haven't got a training aid, you can just use your range basket. But what we're looking for here is to set the club at a similar angle as the club shaft would be at, so about a 45-degree angle. And we talked earlier about how early extension generally results in an into-outswing path. And you can see here, if my right hip kicks in and I early extend, the club's going to clatter into that stick. But if I was to do the opposite and I was to turn my chest and get the club moving across me a little bit more by keeping that right hip back, it should be pretty straightforward to miss the stick. So I feel this initially in some shorter swings, because the faster I go, the more chance I have of going back to my old swing patterns that are going to be a little bit this way. And the more I slow it down, I can get a better feeling of turning my chest and keeping my right hip back. So with the ball, hopefully it'll look a little bit this way. And we should start to feel ourselves restricting that right hip, rotating the body, and hopefully the club will be coming across us a little bit more, as opposed to right hip in, into outswing path into the stick. So if you're struggling with early extension, there's a couple of really good drills of keeping that right hip back and hopefully getting a bit more rotation and therefore compression on the golf ball. If you found this video useful, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe. There's loads of golf coaching content coming soon, and I'll see you again in the next one.